guest this evening is Steve E. Asher. And Steve is awesome. I'm going to give you his bio here. Paranormal researcher Steve E. Asher is also a freelance writer and artist, as well as a lover of music. Previously, he worked over 10 years in law enforcement as a correctional officer. Steve is a longtime researcher of the paranormal. He has traveled worldwide, mostly recently to Thailand, where he and his wife adopted one of their 2 sons. Steve is an avid lover of the nighttime. He has said this is when he feels most truly alive in the darkness of the night and therefore most productive in his paranormal research and writing. He is a native of Princeton, Kentucky. Author Steve E. Asher, that's a tongue twister, has always had a deep interest in the Kentucky State Penitentiary since his early childhood. His late father told him of the many dark things that inhabit the oppressive walls and halls of the prison. Once Asher began working there himself, he experienced some of these same phenomena himself, and it was then he knew he must write about them. And his website, is steveeasher.com. His books are available on amazon.com, I believe, also Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, which I suggest people read, and Hauntings of the excuse me, I'm losing my voice here, guys. Sorry. Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum, which is like the world we live in right now, I suspect. So please welcome Steve to the show this evening. Good evening, Steve.
Hey, Solaris. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to have you on board again. It's been a while since I've talked to you, and I know you're a busy man, so tell everybody what you've been doing.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I mean, just like everyone else, juggling work, juggling this, juggling your passions. We recently had an addition to the family with a grandbaby. I'm actually a granddad now, of all things. And of course, researching books, checking out new haunts and things like that. It's really interesting that, as you know, the second book is about a Western, the Western Lunatic Asylum here in Western Kentucky, and actually in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And I'm putting stuff together for the third book, which is going to be about a Catholic orphanage, kind of a compound. It's had a whole lot of different lives and a whole lot of different incarnations throughout its time and stuff. And I've actually been talking to some people about some recent activity that's been happening in the area. I had got to go there some years back and do a proper investigation, with the whole team and all that stuff. And you never know when something's kind of a hit and miss, because sometimes that happens just because a place may have activity for whatever reason. The energy there may dissipate or change or relocate. I mean, it's sometimes just the way it works. A place has a certain activity at whatever time and whatever certain situation you're in, but sometimes it changes. But it seems like it's kind of started picking up again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like it's a season as well. I don't know if you've ever used actually have seen a correlation, but usually this time of year there's more activity around October and Halloween, what we call Samhain as well. So a lot of things are happening where the veils are extra thin, more so than usual. So a lot of spiritual activity. Now you said, or maybe you didn't, but is there anomalous activity connected to UFOs?
Yeah, I mean, I would think definitely so. It would seem that, well, there's definitely a correlation between hauntings and UFO activity or contactee activity. Again, a lot of times that sort of mirrors each other. You could almost lay a grid over another grid, and it would pretty much match up very evenly. And at the time of night, the sort of activity, the sort of communications, people being physically moved, touched, whatnot. But I do think that this time of year is magical, and I'm not being silly when I say that. I definitely feel that there is a increase in energy, and I think it's because we're all energy at the core of it. I think that we are affected by that just as easily, as anything else. And it may not be even a thing that it's the energy that's more active. Maybe it's our perception and our ability to filter that energy is higher during this time. I don't know.
Right, that makes a lot of sense as well. Well, and I'm sure it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see what's happening here, where we see all the conflict going on also when it comes down to just the spiking and the polarization of people. And it seems to me like that's a lot of heated energy, a lot of anger, a lot of rage. And I kind of wonder if it doesn't influence the atmospheric conditions and make it more primed for supernatural activity.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it would be a thing of, just like, you walk into a room after a heated argument. I mean, anybody who has even an nth of an empathic thing, which I think we all have it, but some people just develop it better and sharpen it, as a tool. But it's just one of those things, definitely, when you have a lot of volatile stuff going on whatever location, be it national or regional or whatever, it takes a toll, and it's venomous. It's negativity and fear and all that is a big vicious cycle, and I think it's just as true for whatever entities are out there. I'm sure they're affected on it by some level too. I'm sure they can read that. Sure.
I agree. Well, looking at your background, and if anybody hasn't read your books, I encourage them to do so because you have some awesome books. And The Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, now that's really well written. And also your personal experience in that whole facility. And that's why I kind of, was kind of going into this direction, because I'm looking at that there's obviously a lot of hostility in a place like that, where there's just hatred, or maybe not even hatred, but just rage or anger and a lot of negativity, to a point where it would leave a signature of a supernatural force to some degree. You want to elaborate on that insofar as your perception and a little bit, and give everybody a teaser of your book?
Sure. You're referring specifically about the penitentiary.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's so funny that you mentioned that. I actually had a gentleman come visit me from Portland as part of a project he was doing and interview me, and so he had flew in down to Nashville, which is maybe an hour from here, and so he come in, loaded up, and we went driving around, and I showed him a few other little places like Gravity Hill and a few other kind of like haunts, but he really wanted to see the penitentiary, so I'm like, sure, it's probably been close to a year since I've really been on the compound up there on the property, even out in front of it, really. And so we were there and talking about this and that and touching base about stuff and kind of recounting it. It's almost like it rekindles it, and it's almost like I've heard people say, like they're talking about something that they consider demonic. Says we don't even say its name. We don't call it like that. And I'm not trying to sound overly dramatic or whatever, but there was a certain weird feeling there that the more I talked about it and the more I kind of dwelled into it and kind of touched back in those memories, and especially the emotions connected to it, I got a little emotional. It surprised me.
Right.
I've been out of there since for a while now, and but it never, again, it never quite leaves you. The thing about the penitentiary, when I wrote about it, it wasn't, again, I never planned on writing about it, and it was just a really weird happenstance. I guess it was synchronicity. I guess at this point, I don't know, be it lucky or unlucky. I just think it was meant to happen. I didn't know it was, but apparently somebody did. But yeah, the energy there is unique, and I'm not saying it's all necessarily a pure evil. I mean, like I said, there's moments of kindness there. You see, inmates caring for their kittens, because a lot of times, they maybe don't have anyone else but those animals to care for. And that's how they get out whatever they need to get out of their nurture, and you would think, as they well did, that if these guys are nurturing and caring for something, they can work through their issues. They have something to foster some love in their hearts. And so there's, again, it's not all stabbings and rapes and all this other stuff, but it's such a strange dichotomy that the energies there are very, very strange, and that's why it washes over you again if you're sensitive at all. That I guess I'm kind of giving a roundabout answer, but it's a very unique energy, and depending on where you are, it's sort of what you pull. It's sort of what you bring to the game. If you go in there and you're a very negative person, it's negative things will come to you. And negative things will come to you regardless, but you are able to deflect them better if you have, light around you or a strong spiritual life or whatever. And it's just one of those things where, especially the time I was there, I went through a lot of changes just as a person, and so I got to see kind of the high points and low points, losing people and having people, that were dear to me die that worked there. That was actually on my team. It leaves sort of an indelible mark, and that is just part of one of many bricks in that wall, because the place had been going since the late 1800s. So that's had a lot of time, from brick to brick piling up all this negativity, all this emotion, all this desperation, all that, and all the emotions that play into that, and has really led to a very, very peculiar sort of place. It's not like anywhere else I've been, because I've been in different institutions, and insert your own joke there, but it was a thing where it was very odd, because again, like I've told you previously, my father had worked there in the 50s, and my grandfather actually had been in there serving time for counterfeiting, and I believe it was bootlegging or something like that. So it's an odd thing, because a lot of times there are generations of people that's come through there, for 50, 60 years, and that's just been their mainstay. It's just like, a lot of families just have a line of police officers or doctors or lawyers or whatnot. A lot of people there are guards. And so they live not only their professional life, but they live their communal life there, because most of those people live in very close to the prison, and it really becomes part of them. And moreover, I think they get a spiritual connection to that, which isn't always healthy.
Agreed. Yeah, it's like an entanglement almost. It's very, very interesting. It's like different bands of energy, very, very close proximity to each other. When you look at the people who are there, and then, of course, the guards who carry a different frequency, and then there's that bleed-through effect, what I call a bleed-through effect, because, you would take some of that home with you. And what's interesting to me is that you look at what's going on there, and I'm sure you've witnessed this, and we might have touched on this before, but how many of these inmates have you ever seen really, have you ever just noticed, were they taken over? Do they seem like they have a spirit inside of them, or is there something missing there that's making these people do things that are just, I'm saying the hardcore people, the people that are just malicious. Do you think there's something going on there where there's just nothing inside the vessel?
Well, I mean, it would be, I definitely couldn't count on my fingers and your fingers both, all the people in there that are just obviously broken, products of, lack of education, neglect, sexual abuse, violence, and addiction, and all the different social ills. But sure, I mean, I've dealt with people who you just, not beyond the look in their eye. I mean, you see a lot of people with like what they call dead eyes, and that's not. It's sort of like almost like a joke. You hear something like in a movie, but that's real. But sometimes there's stuff that you see, like you can see something behind that. It's not, they have dead eyes, but you can see, you can sense it. You can, I will say I can smell it on them. That something else is going on. And, sometimes maybe they've had some sort of darker connection with some sort of, I don't want to say demon worship or whatever, but definitely some dark rituals, or something come to them, or they come to something. And for whatever reason, it latched on, And again, I am not a psychoanalyst. My course study was in criminal justice, but it's so friggin' hard to explain without setting you in front of a person. I'm sure that you've dealt, past people on the street, and it's very, very infrequent. I don't want to make it sound like these guys are just stark raving mad. I've passed inmates like this. There's once or twice I've passed a few officers that you could just see that there was blackness in them, and it scared me a little bit, and I definitely did my best to avoid those people, because you have to, sometimes you have to protect yourself.
Right. Yeah. You get a vibe off of people. I know when I worked security and surveillance, it was that same thing. Not to the level, obviously, you worked, but just getting a vibe off of certain people, and having that situation awareness, and knowing that you just get a red flag. I mean, certain things are good, certain things are a danger zone, and people's energetic signatures. Yeah, it's very, very interesting to see that. I've noticed it more and more lately with regular people that aren't in prison. That's what's so weird, So, got to keep an eye out for that one too. But insofar as the psychic protection goes, what did you do to protect yourself in the facility?
Well, as I said, I kind of went through a transformation, and initially when I come to work at the penitentiary, I was a relatively religious person. My faith was pretty strong. Would pray pretty regularly. The type of guy, like if you went to a restaurant, you see him sit down, he kind of bow his head and say a quick little prayer before he ate. I mean, I was relatively devout. I was no saint, but I was relatively devout, as are a lot of people in this area. I wasn't anything special, but just coming through again, seeing things from there, and some of the way people would treat each other, and more or less, I mean, in any sense of the word, molest each other spiritually, even, and it changed you, and it hardened me up. It definitely changed me working in there, and it's taken years to gain back a little bit of the. And I sound so goth when I say this stuff. I don't mean to kind of gain back a little bit of my soul that I think I gave up. And understand that's just 10 years working there.
Right.
I've seen guys work there 25, 30 years, and they're just gone. And when
Right.
they leave there, they have nothing. And that's usually the ones that, unfortunately, take their own lives or something. So, but yeah, it was. I mean, I don't know if I'm answering this exactly how you want me to answer it. But it's just a thing where, again, I went sort of through a transformation. But I usually would say a prayer before I went to work. I definitely would say the Archangel Michael prayer before I would go on to a hunt. We'd gather hands. I mean, I'm talking, it's not that we were a church group, but, our kind of tagline for the Caldwell County Paranormals was, a belief in God, but an interest in the paranormal. And, we just left it God. It doesn't necessarily mean Jesus or whoever. It's whatever. We didn't discriminate. But, losing friends and losing children, I mean, we've talked about that off the air.
Right.
Definitely hardened me up. Definitely a different person now. Mm-hmm. And maybe in time I'll get back to that guy. I kind of feel like I'm sitting on the couch talking to my doctor. But it's just one of those things where there's a toll, and there's a price for getting into research, and there's a price sometimes for, you want to see things, and you have to be careful, because especially, if you were at all have any, I'm trying to find the right word for this, any sort of baggage. Leave it at the door before you come to work. Leave it at the door before you go into investigation. And if you don't feel well, you feel compromised in a way, don't do it. Because there's things that will latch onto you. Mm-hmm. And be it people, be it dark entities, you can call it whatever. I really don't call a lot of stuff demons. I've never encountered one. I don't plan on encountering one. I don't want to see one. Mm-hmm. But I've seen stuff that's dark enough for me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's that toxicity you're talking about, at the facility, for example. And then, of course, it was interesting that you mentioned some of those other law enforcement, other guards that were there so long that they literally, it was like their energy was being bled and literally drained by the people that were there, probably because they needed that life force, that prana. So very, very interesting. And I'm actually glad that you got out when you did. And it seems to me like you are very full in consciousness and spirituality. So, you're very smooth in energy. So whatever you're doing is obviously restoring who you really are as a very beautiful spiritual being. So that's really nice, too. And like I said, I applaud you for doing that work, because it's hard. It's a very hard environment. I don't know how anybody can do it. And what's interesting is you left there with knowing that supernatural activity, but it still pulled you into researching even more so, it seems like. So why couldn't you let go of the supernatural? Was it just something you were just so interested in, you wanted to keep diving into it?
Well, I mean, again, as a small kid, I had different, experiences, shadow figures, things like that. Visitations, a visitation from my great-grandmother who was Native American, and it was just a thing that it was kind of always there, and it wasn't, because I've talked to friends before, and they're talking about, oh, well, so you've had a lot of really weird experiences. Well, no, not really. I'm just like everybody else. And I kind of mention this, like, okay. And then I mention something else, and then I think, oh, yeah, well, there's that one time. And it's like, geez, man, I mean, that's quite a bit of stuff. I'm not in, mm-hmm. But again, I don't want to come off like the guy who's seeing, spooks in every picture, and every place I investigate, yes, this place is haunted or whatever, because then you lose any validity and whatnot. But it was just that. It's just been a lifetime, honestly, when I was a kid, just a lifetime of being scared and a lifetime of wanting to know what it is. And then once you get a little, again, you never are an inkling of it, but I thought I had a little bit of a grip on it, what was going on, that I could kind of skirt around things and at least know what to avoid. Let's say that. And the things that I felt that were not particularly toxic are, something that was going to put me in harm's way or whatnot with my family or friends and stuff, and somebody would get hurt, I kind of went to that. Mm-hmm. Definitely, I always had an interest in weird, curious, darker stuff, or what people would consider weird, darker stuff. But I'm always have been very mindful to meter that. I try to be very self-aware in my research and my behaviors, and I always try to kind of check myself in regards of that. Mm-hmm. I think once you get too far down a rabbit hole one way or the other, that's when things are dicey, because you get into tight of a corner and you can't back out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree on that. Yeah, you have a very grounded approach, which I really like, and you have to have it, in my opinion, if you're doing this type of investigative work, which is it can be very intense. So I'm glad that you're doing that for sure. And I agree with you that people should take the spirit world more seriously when it comes down to investigating the supernatural. There's a lot of that. Some people are just too relaxed about it and keep their guard down. And of course, they can take on more than they need to from a site, an environment, or some type of a species or whatever it is that's out there that's been interfacing. And I call this species these days because I really don't know what to call some of this supernatural activity. Is it a living intelligence? Is it a dead person? Is it a spirit? I know people like to categorize. What is your impression of what you're experiencing or what you have in the past? How do you categorize them?
Well, I mean, of course, coming into it, like I was like everybody else, like, well, this is a residual haunt, and this is a human spirit, and okay, then there's a non-physical being, and that's a spirit, a non-physical spirit or a demon or whatever. At this point, I don't know. I mean, I can spitball. I can say that I've definitely dealt with some intelligent energy, and I've definitely have dealt with some stuff that didn't feel human at all, that maybe feel real uncomfortable, kind of claustrophobic feeling. These are the type of thing that you really feel like a pressure around you, mm-hmm. like a sick, uncomfortable feeling. Like mm-hmm. if you've ever been in the presence of somebody who maybe you later found out was, good Lord, a child molester or something horrible like that, and you kind of go, that's why I felt like that mm-hmm. unease, that just like, no, I don't need to be in this room with this person.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes you get that. I mean, I really can't categorize it. I can say that it's something that, that we with what on this plane don't know what that is. Now, if we knew that maybe in some sort of pre-existence, whatever, or maybe that's just something because we have this meat suit on, we can't comprehend and adjust what we're dealing with. Maybe once we're free of those bonds instantly, to be like boom, like that. I mean, I've actually talked to a gentleman not long ago about sleep paralysis, and we were talking about, because this guy was a very analytical guy, and he was talking about, says, well, I definitely believe this is a thing of the mind, and magnetic stimulation to the brain, and this and that. And I'm like, okay, I mean, and that sounds good, and that very well may be it. But that's just like telling somebody who is having a very vivid hallucination that it's not real. You're not going to, their perception is a reality, which a lot of people really believe that. What we think is what it is. To tell a person that what they're feeling is not valid, I think that is the problem where you start. There are very clear lines between what is considered scientific research and either faith-based or emotional-based research. Mm-hmm. I know it's probably not I kind of go by my and I generally have not been betrayed by my gut. In the times I didn't follow my gut, almost every time. And so I don't know how scientific that is, but the older that I get, the more, I'm trying to think of it. It was like the older I get, the more I want to believe in magic. And mm-hmm. that might sound a little foo-foo, but it's just where I'm at. I'm open more to the mystical and to the realities. There are other, like you said, other species that probably have come up and been with us and maybe watched over us for millennia. And for whatever reason, they're going, oh, aren't they cute? They got their little suit and they got their 9 to 5 and they think this is what time is. And they think, okay, they think this is what reality is. Well, I'll wait till they really find out. And it's just almost like watching a child play act. It's like, well, they're not ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe
Right.
that's why we don't full on see what are shadow beings, I don't know. I mean, that's just my,
It's very complex when you think about it. You know.
theory, if you
Yeah.
want to
No.
put it like that.
Right. Well, there's so many levels to it. Like I said, it's a multidimensional space and field, and with different frequencies modulating at different waves. And I think people should. Well, obviously, most people don't pay attention to that. And there is a place for the science and the analysis, but there's also a place for spirituality and consciousness, like you're talking about. And the one thing that I'm very, very familiar with, and I know we've talked about it before, is the covert warfare programs and the way they use psychotronic interface with a target. Now, this is becoming more and more popular, so that's something with your background, especially. I think you can factor in, and you might find that you're going to be seeing more things that are a lot of supernatural, but a lot of hijacked supernatural with technological interface. That's my own take on it. But that's why I think that people get kind of distortion when they're receiving data, because their antenna gets kind of tweaked by these technologies. That's just my own take. And I think with the stuff that's coming up down the road, some of the 5G and beyond, I think we're going to be seeing more and more of the supernatural, but also a weaponized supernatural. So I don't know what your impression is of that.
Well, on beyond the extremes of the weaponizations of these type of technologies, I at one time really wanted to do research at the penitentiary. I wanted to go in there and I wanted to check out, especially the electrical systems, because there is a lot of very old. I mean, this is an ancient building, and there's a lot of old sections with old wiring and old powered couplings and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, obviously they had to update certain things, but the bones of it is still old. And high EMF fields can cause all kinds of stuff. It can jack up your immune system. It can make you very irritable. It can make you see stuff. It can make you violent and have all kinds of delusions and stuff. And that's why I presented it. I said, this might be something, considering that especially the older sections is where they have the segregation units and what they call the cutter's walk. This is usually this is like 14 left and 3 cell house. Constantly, you would have someone who's hurting themselves, trying to chew their lips off, that's trying to poke things in different orifices. I mean, I'm talking just ungodly stuff. And I'm like, this could be a thing that's not necessarily giving these guys their bad backgrounds, but it's definitely not helping it. Mm-hmm. And right. They've totally shot that down. And I tried that several different times. But I do the more that becomes so invasive, especially to the point if they, because you always hear, well, they're eventually going to have you chipped, or they're going to have this and that. I think once you really have that in your body, and that's really playing with your your personal electromagnetic field, because we all have it, everything has it. I think it's just going to completely go haywire. And I'm not talking any sort of Mark of the Beast stuff or any sort of biblical stuff. And I'm not discounting you. There are certain things that just because we can do it doesn't necessarily mean we need to. And I think we're so far ahead, and we're trying to jump so far ahead that we're not looking at the effect on the wear and tear on the human body and the human psyche. And I'd actually had spoken to a doctor friend of mine, and we were talking about, I was like, obviously certain doctors go, well, I'll treat this symptom, this and that, okay, or try to treat the whole disease. And the way he explained it was like, look, you have a spiritual body, you have a human body, and you have an emotional body, which I'd never really heard that before. Mm-hmm. And which it kind of blew me away. And I was like, well, I never really thought about it like that. And says, well, like, if you unbalance any of the three, it's going to affect the other two. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a pH balance in the human body. And I think that's real true. And again, it touches back on the electromagnetics that we all are. I mean, down to the atoms, we're held together with that. Mm-hmm. And again, if you start playing with that and you start, like I said, weaponizing this sort of thing, all kinds of psych warfare, I think that's something we can't come back from. And I think we're, what we knew as humanity is just not going to be that. And I hate to sound really doom and gloom like that, because that's not really. You're not. That's not my thing. I agree with you. But it's
I totally agree with you, because it's a fragmentation. And I know, because I've been there interfacing with technology in the past, and I can tell you it's not good. And what they don't understand is that, well, maybe they do, that we have this vessel, we have this divine vessel, which has a spirit inside, and also outside, but literally we are divine beings getting interfaced with technologies that are limited to some degree because they're manufactured here on this linear world. So it does create some kind of a strange anomalous bleed through. And that's my question also, is like, the parameters are setting up with these types of technologies. It's not factoring in consciousness or the multiverse or different dimensional levels of who we really are. And I think that's where we're running into some problems. So that's why I think the supernatural is going to be really intense and even maybe more amplified than we've ever seen it because of this technology that's out there right now. And that's something for you to look out for too, because you're doing a lot of investigations. And I think you mentioned you were seeing more and more of an activity, right? Or no?
Right. Well, I mean, I willfully step back. I mean, I'm not like trying to be like the Amish guy and, at the hunt and stuff, but, I do use old world technologies, the vining rods and dowsing and things like that.
They're great.
It's one of those things. I honestly went from a very nuts and bolts way of it and going, okay, well, we got to have, this temperature gauge and we got to have this EMF meter and we got to have this and that, to, okay, well, that's great. We can have one of those, but let's make sure we have the rods, because almost inevitably we go in somewhere that's going to have a strong electrical surge and boom, your batteries are gone. And okay, and you're constantly having to feed these things. I've never had any of that stuff go down. And generally I got very positive results. But the thing that it's so funny because you were talking about with the warfare element of it. Do you remember the old movie? I think it was called Firefox. It had Clint Eastwood, and they had the machines that you can get in there, and it was like, oh, that's crazy, and no, that'll never happen. Which, I mean, years ago, I guarantee it, probably years and years before that ever happened, and which I've heard from other people that talked about the secret space program and whatnot, that definitely existed well before then, probably from like early alien craft, resalvaging and what do you call it, refitting, and what's the term when you break down something?
Well, reverse engineer it.
That's it, and so I think all that definitely played into it. But I think that, again, you can sort of throw it's such an old thing, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that you can go, okay, well, that's fine. We have that element, but you lose the spiritual and you lose the wisdom and you lose the soul element. The soul consciousness, the soul IQ, if that's a term, that I would assume that most of the more races had. And again, I was never a big ufology person. Mm-hmm. Yes, I had sort of a spotting of something when I was a young kid, but as far as I know, I've not had a personal interaction with it. It always struck me as, like you said, you can really over and make yourself accessible for whoever wants to run in here on you. If we are so dependent on certain technologies, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but it's just a thing. I don't think it's healthy, and I think obviously, well, you can just see the change in how kids are, and this is definitely sounding like a grandpa, I'm sure, but most kids now, or even adults, you take their cell phone or take their iPad or something, they're screwed, they're lost. They don't know what to do with their city. They're irritable. It's like a compulsion. It's like a obsessive thing. They have to be plugged in all the time. Yeah. And I know, like in times when I have stepped away from that, you kind of reset your natural clock, and you feel better. You feel healthier. And that's not to say, I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody of getting on there and doing my my paperwork for and doing stuff for books and researching about different locations and ley lines and whatnot. You have to be the master of that.
Very true. Yeah, I don't see a spiritual benchmark. It's just an observation. But yeah, everybody's saturated in technology, but there's no spiritual compass or universal compass. Without that, there's nothing. We can have all the technology in the world, but if we don't have and we don't utilize our higher consciousness and our spiritual benchmark, in my opinion, it's going to flatline. And I think that's what we're seeing as a society. It's going in reverse, and it's very concerning. So, and yeah, I can understand you being a grandpa, and congratulations, by the way. But yeah, I can see that I would be very protective of my kids, because I wouldn't want my children accessing phones until they're older. I'm sorry. These kids that are like 8, 7, 9 years old, I don't know why they need a cell phone. I can understand for an emergency and, weirdos out there, but I don't know. There has to be a different way, because this is a crazy world. It's getting really, really strange, But I really applaud for what you do, and I think that you've got a really nice moral compass. So it was always nice to interview you. You know that, right? I'm very happy about what you're doing, and I've always told you you're doing well. You're very smooth, and now you have House of Asher. Yeah, I know you. You want to tell everybody about that real quick? House of Asher.
Sure. Well, I mean that's I totally lifted that from House of Usher. I hope they
that's what I was going to say too.
But,
I love it. But go ahead.
I think they'll leave me alone.
That's great.
Well, no. I'm a paranormal, alien horror movie, literature nut, especially like Lovecraft, and like that. I've always been into that, and just happened to fall into the paranormal stuff in regards of writing and doing radio was just a bonus. And I did some radio work, here locally years and years ago, but you can't really feed a family. Again, you kind of saw the steps of it, and I'm still kind of get my legs with it. It's one of these things. I don't know where to end up being. I'm not looking to try to jump out to that Shark Tank, man, that you guys swim in. I will not say more than that. But you know what I'm saying? It can be very cutthroat. And I've met a lot of people, but it's also it's a game, and everybody wants to be on top.
Mm-hmm.
But do it out of pure curiosity and a certain selfish element. I like to have people on that interest me. It's sort of it's playtime. I get to put these people in their mouth, kind of apart, and kind of go, all right, well, what did you mean when you guys did this, or how did you feel when a lot of my stuff is, I'm kind of like that. I jokingly call myself the Alan Alda, and I'm like, but how did it make you feel? That kind of deal. So I don't know. I mean, that's what I've been trying to do. So far, House of Asher's done pretty well, and I've actually been able to interview some pretty cool people, and who knows.
I think it's awesome. I like what you're doing.
Well, thank you. I mean, again, I'm a very, very smart, and a lot of people are doing what they do. I mean, I do definitely kind of my feet in the Kentucky clay, because a lot of it are definitely things that have happened here. Because, like you said, write what you know, and what I know is the South. What I know is Kentucky, especially Western Kentucky. And the Appalachians, because my mother's people were from there. So, but, there's, when you make that connection with people, because me, I mean, obviously, I can't shut up. It's a thing that once people know that you are earnest and that you're willing to let them talk about their thing, because everybody likes to talk about their thing. They open up and they let their walls down, and it doesn't feel like, you don't have to ask them, softball questions or whatever. You can just kind of rap with them, and I know it's kind of an antiquated term, but that's how I like to do it. I hate to feel like I'm interviewing somebody, because, so you ever seen people like their eyes just glaze?
Oh yeah.
Like, and they dial it in, and they, and okay, well, tell me your website. Okay, cool. And, tell me something personal. Tell me about why you went. I always like to ask people their origin stories. Everyone has a reason. Why are you into this? Why are you a cop? Why are you a doctor? Why are you a psychologist? Mm-hmm. And that's what's fun. Peeling back the layers and going, okay, that's why you're like that. Okay, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And that's fun for me. And if it ties in with the paranormal and, bonus.
Right. Well, it's opening up the lines of communication. I like that too. I like a more casual conversation. Although there are times when I do more of a serious interview. It depends on the person. But yeah, totally. And I think that's what I like about interviewing also, is opening up the line of communication. Beings like us, we wouldn't be on mainstream. There's no way. So it is nice to see how we're able to go into the, what I call the truth media or alternative media, and start doing these investigations, or just having people on who are of interest to communicate what they're up to. Yeah. I think it's fabulous, and I'm glad you're doing what you do, and I think it's awesome. It really is. I have to ask you now, and we might have touched on Bigfoot before, but what about Bigfoot for you in that area? Have you done any investigations?
Well, most of the stuff that I've done, I've had other team members that are kind of the crypto guys of the team. My friend Lucas Frelix, definitely is very big into that. I've like cross-referenced stuff with guys like Kirk Stokes, who you really should try to get on. He's a really good guy. I'm not trying to drop names, but I'm just letting you guys know, some of these guys I've worked with. Very solid earth guy, No smoke and mirrors to this guy. He tries to do very legitimate research, and he's not a hey, look at me guy. He's very quiet about his research. So, which tells me that he's probably honest about it. That I've done had to do more with the LBL. I definitely had been doing research like Dogmen and Bigfoot stuff as recently, because the third book actually has a story about what would, I'm not for sure, honestly, if it would be a Bigfoot or a Dogman story, because, there had been recent reports of something that kind of is almost like a chimera, like a melding of the two. And so, I don't know. I mean, that had just been recently, actually, Morganville, Kentucky. There had been an area called Slack Farm, which I'm not sure I've told you about that or not. It had been a Mississippian Native American culture, and they had like burial mounds, and had let these guys come in there and look at arrowheads, and just for private collections, nothing serious, and we'll put it back to normal. And so anyway, they went in there and they just ransacked this place, taking pottery and taking real elements. I'm not talking about just discarded stuff. I'm talking about taking things off bodies, taking parts, selling children's skulls and stuff on black markets. Really, really dastardly stuff. And they had always that part of Kentucky having like the wild man or the woolly man or whatever some people would call it. But after all that went down, it seemed like it amped it. It seemed like it spiked it up. And there's been, multiple reports of that. And I thought that was really interesting, because you have a couple different camps. Some people talk about, well, Bigfoot is just, like the Gigantopithecus, some sort of variant mutation of that's just still out there. That's maybe been with us since forever, but, they're, you always hear the joke, the hide and seek champion forever, But then you also, it's some sort of alien hybrid or some sort of pan-dimensional thing that can kind of come and go, and in the shadows and all that. And to answer you honestly, I don't know what it is. I mean, we definitely have looked into it, and definitely have spoken to a fair amount of people about it. We had actually had a story in LBL, and it's an older story. It's not my story, but they had talked about where there was a family that was camping down there and was savagely attacked, and basically they were murdered, torn apart. And some of the people, I want to get into the gorier details, but they had found the sleeping bags with some of them up in high parts of the tree, and they couldn't really explain what it was. And it was that old story, well, maybe an escaped lunatic, whatever. And it's like, well, that's a lot of fast work and bloody work for like one person, unless this is like Michael Myers or something. And that's always stayed here. But Kentucky, by nature, is a very mysterious area. As you know, Native Americans would always come through, and they would hunt here. And they would maybe camp long enough to formation of the herds, but they generally didn't stay here because there's a lot of stuff. Sorry, say something else. A lot of weird kind of oddball stuff here, and it's always been a mystical area. And so, I mean, does it surprise me that there's something called Bigfoot here? No. Does it surprise me, honestly, that people latched onto it nationally and internationally? Yeah, but then again, they're all over. Right. There's all kinds of variant names and whatever. I have never seen a Bigfoot, and honestly, I don't think I want to. No. I know a lot of people really, really want to go out there, and they really want to go find it. I've had a lot of interactions with, I guess, like wild dogs. I've had a gob of interaction with owls, and that's a whole nother discussion.
Interesting.
But I don't know. I spoke to a friend of mine who, does like abduction regressions, and we were talking about something. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do a regression. I'm a little scared.
Well, they can be symbolic of abductions. Yeah.
Sure, but then again,
or they're messengers. They're spiritual messengers too.
You know what? And see, that's what I took more from it. I never felt uncomfortable, and whenever these things would come to me and fly over me, as I'm riding bikes or whatever at night, you didn't hear them at all. You just felt a presence. You look up, and that thing's just flying as we were going and staying with you. Or would land out in the street in front of me. I used to, years ago, we used to like run, deliver papers early morning stuff. But that happened all the time. But I never took it as, again, something like that was necessarily threatening. I always felt very kind of connected to nature, and that's not like I'm some deep hippie guy, but
it's more like an animal totem. It could be in correlation to your ancestry too. You said you had relatives who were Native American, perhaps. Like the ravens connected to me as a totem as well. So,
I don't know. Well, I make a joke, but do you remember the original Clash of the Titans?
Mm-hmm. Loved it.
Do you remember the little metallic owl that was made?
Right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, I remember when I was a little kid. This has nothing to do with the paranormal. It's just what a geek I am. I actually had taken like aluminum foil and this and that, and made like the wings and this and that, and tried to make one. I mean, it didn't look like that. It was like a very, very poor version of that, but it was always an interest to me. And actually, I have like on some of my cards that I give to people at signings, and it actually has an owl on it. So which. Well, it depends on who you talk to, too, because people think of the owl, and they go, oh, we're thinking of Molech, and, all this sort of dark symbolism. No. I'm like, come on, man, come on. Well, I mean, people will read, people, and it's fear-based. And your intentions are whatever, water can quench you or water can drown you. Mm-hmm, right. So, I mean, that's what you bring with it. So I've worked very, very hard on losing the negativity. And, again, I'm not super, super chill, but I think I'm getting there. But, I've really went out of my way to try to be that guy because, when you work in a very kind of aggro thing like police work, as or anything like that with the military, that's sort of your calling card. And that's a face you have to wear. That is a tool that you have to keep ready at all times. Mm-hmm. And it takes a long time to kind of pull out of that. I've had a lot of friends who had come out of the military and things like that. And it's taken them years to step down, and sometimes they never quite do. But and that's why I always well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it truly is. You are broken down and made into the image that they want, and then sometimes they wonder why people come back and they can't function. Working at Piggly Wiggly or something, when they were out, doing what they had to handle and do. But for me, to get back to the owl thing, for me, it is a higher self. It is about learning. It is about being, okay with the darkness. Because again, I kind of had that time I felt, feel most productive at night. I do. Like now, I'm cool. I'm super cool right now. I'm feeling really good because, like I said, usually when I do interviews, it's either earlier in the day or whatnot, and you're juggling, everything's going on, people's running up and down the street, cars are honking, and right now it's just crickets. Outside is it's very pastoral, and I don't know.
Very nice. I like the night. I'd hold on to that owl. That's good. It's wisdom. It's a message for. Yeah. Totally.
Well, there's just something magical about it, and the more, again, the older I get, the more I want to believe in magic. The more that I'm more open to the spiritual side as opposed to, again, the nuts and bolts of it. Because when you're young, you're scared sometimes. Because there's sort of a thing in the paranormal sometimes. It's like, well, look, I've got the new this is that, and this has whatever, filter in it. Well, cool, this has the 6 lights instead of the 3 lights, so it's more, it's better at picking this. I was like, oh, that's cool, but how do you feel? What are you taking away from it? What's your gut's telling you? What is your spirit telling you? What are you seeing without your eyes? And I know I sound like I'm talking like I'm a friggin' Jedi, but there's truth in that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm not a shaman. Anything? Who knows? I think you are. In 10 or 15 years.
I think you have it within your DNA and your cellular memory. I believe that we are very spiritual beings that are just kind of masked and cloaked. But you're learning and growing and evolving by what you're doing. And it's also a reactivation of who you are. And that takes on so many different levels, in my opinion, anyway. So I think we're here to master consciousness. I really do. And also understand what we're here on the multidimensional scale for. Because all these smoke screens, after a while, we just have to peel away these layers and start seeing things for what it is, which is really about pure energy and also how it formulates around us. But your state of consciousness is so important, as you probably know. So, I see mankind, like I said, we're in the midst of almost a civil war on this and America's getting pretty gnarly right now. And, I look in and I see the exploration of people in the supernatural, and they're very interested in that world. And I'm thinking, well, we're a step away. We're teetering between that world, life and death right now. When I look at America, it seems to me like we're teetering in between the worlds. We can be a ghost race too, in a sense that people should hold on to the moment and live it as best they can, because right now I don't think they're paying attention. So not to get philosophical, but I'm just saying there's a lot going on.
No, you're right. I mean, I was going to say, of course, you think of I don't think we're as advanced maybe as the Atlanteans were, but there's that thing of, again, tipping your hand. There's I don't know. I think that I have learned to pull back from a lot of things and just sort of come at it with, man, this is going to sound really hippy-dippy, but just come at it with love and try to come at it with a bit of understanding. Not wrong. I'll protect what's mine, and I'll protect my family till my last breath. But what I mean is, because I am a Second Amendment guy. That doesn't mean that, I'm whatever. But I'm like, hey, if you want to protect yourself, protect yourself. Mm-hmm. But it's a thing of having the wisdom to know when you don't have a choice.
Right. Yeah.
But you are right. I think that it is a thing that, I think everything's secular. And just like back in the days of the actual Civil War, that obviously was a very dark time. And there was a lot of fear and a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of back and forth. And even in the 60s, as late as the 70s when I was a kid, just starting to go to school when schools were integrated. That was extremely volatile. And now it's coming back again. And it's the same old ghosts, the same old demons. It's the same old song. But we keep dancing to it, and that really bothers me. We're capable of such beauty, and so on the same end, we were blessed with a certain duality,
right?
And it's up to us where we go with it. And I think that ties in with the quest for the spirit and the quest for knowledge and the quest, which I think if you don't. I'm not saying you necessarily go out and sit in a graveyard or whatever, some sort of institution and try to find a spirit, but you have to have that element.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree. And we're going to have a break there, so hold that thought. Everybody, you're listening to Hyperspace. This is Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm Solaris, BlueRaven. My wonderful guest tonight is Steve E. Asher. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.